Well, we're coming back from a midweek holiday, so good to see the S-Shakes. If you're suggesting that we like to see a big gap up, you need to compare that with the Nifty futures. So it'll be roughly around 130 points gap up that we're likely to see in the next 45 minutes when we open up. But to discuss a few stocks, well, we're joined by Anand Tandon. Morning, Anand. Thanks so much for joining in. Well, we'll be discussing Zee in greater detail, so I'll put that aside for now. Let's talk about Bajaj Finance. They came up with their quarterly update. It looked pretty good because the AUM growth was out there. However, the number of loans that declined. Now, CLSA, they are saying that if this growth is going to be led by higher ticket loans, that could be under pressure in case things go wrong and there is a slowdown. What's your view on the stock? Valuation-wise, has always been expensive.
Right, so we'll leave the valuation aside. Basically, it is now being viewed more and more as a credit card company in the hope that they will be able to launch their credit card. But otherwise, if you look at credit growth generally, and you can see that from the bank, that is certainly an area that has been growing. Of course, most of the banks have been doing it for lending to corporates, whereas this is a consumer lending. But even if you look at SBI, for example, SBI credit cards, they also are, showing fairly robust growth. And at the moment, the thesis that you are operating under is that the domestic consumption growth, at least at the higher income end, is the one likely to move up. So while there could be an argument to be made that the higher ticket will reduce the size, the reality is that is where the growth is likely to come in, because you are looking at the higher income group relatively in India, trying to pick up credit and expand houses, increase the consumer durables and so on. So I don't think that is so much a strategic worry to me, because if the loan size were to come down, I'm sure Bajaj will also adapt. From a corporate perspective, they've been doing most of the right things. So, if you're comfortable with the valuation, it remains a core holding.
Okay, if you're comfortable with the valuations. We're going to, of course, talk in greater detail about this whole Zee-Sony merger, getting the CCI approval. But what are your thoughts? Now this merged entity has, 24% share. It's higher than Star at 20%. And there's so many benefits, right? Cost optimization, bringing down employee costs, etc. Do you think the best is already in the price, Anand, or is there more to go?
Well, I think there is more to go if they manage it well. There is always a problem when you're trying to put two companies together. But the interesting thing this time is that the Zee promoters have a very small stake in the company. One of the risks that was always there and that we have seen in past in Zee has been that there has been a sudden increase in production costs. And if that were to happen, that can take away some of the sheen. But I'm assuming that, with Sony also watching carefully, you cannot have a sudden unexplained increase in production costs. And that will mean that, as you mentioned, the size, the bouquet of products that they have, Zee is stronger in the regional, Sony is stronger in the, in the main languages and so on. So put together, they will be able to offer advertisers a very strong bouquet, and therefore should be able to increase their market share if things go well.
Okay, in fact...
so you did talk about Bajaj Finance, right? But it's not just Bajaj Finance, Anand. There is, you just look at Tuesday's session, IDFC First Bank, Mahindra & Mahindra Finance, IndusInd Bank. I mean, there was a RBL Bank, the 5, 6, 7, 8% moves across the board. Out of this entire banking financial services space, what do you like best, Anand?
So, we've been talking about this for a while now. I think I've been arguing for the fact that the credit growth will be picking up, and therefore you should be looking at banking, because as the interest rate firm up, their ability to pass on that increase is fairly strong for the moment, and the balance sheets are fairly good. Now, what has happened is that obviously the spread between the credit growth and the deposit growth has become fairly large, and the deposit growths are still slowing down, are still not growing fast enough to be able to keep up with the kind of credit growth that we have begun to witness. So while the initial phase, pretty much the tide will lift all boats, and that's what we are seeing, we have now got to a stage where I think within the next few months, you'll have to look at those which have the highest franchise for being able to pick up deposits. So, so far the ability was to be able to lend, and therefore you were looking at the corporate-facing banks, because that is the place where the larger banks benefit the most. Now you have to add to that the fact that they should be able to pick up deposits, otherwise they will find a strain in terms of credit growth. And this brings you to focus back on the leading private sector banks. So I would argue that, this is now a time for looking at of course, continuing to be looking at the top corporate banks from the public sector, but adding to that now the traditional good old private sector banks, which so far had been leading the rally for the last several years, but have been taking a bit of a rest right now. So rather than looking at many of the smaller banks, which will have to pick up the deposit rates faster, I would still think that you are better off looking at a Kotak, HDFC, ICICI kind of Axis kind of play, because that is where you'll have the best of both worlds.
Right. Well, by the way, Macrotech developers just came out with their update looking cracker, best ever quarterly sales for the company. And their debt has gone down quite a bit compared to what they had last year as well. So that'll be one of the stocks in focus. It's had a pretty stellar run. We'll talk more about that.
That's a Mumbai player, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it almost blows my mind to think with real estate prices where they are in Mumbai, sales continue to do very well. Someone was saying that September has grown 1% month on month over the previous month, I mean August. Wow. Which is, and August was a record, so September is a new record.
I mean, even these numbers, I mean, 60% year-on-year growth in pre-sales, right?
Yeah.
People are definitely upgrading, buying more homes. I mean, you can see that there is this gap between the rich and the poor that's sort of widening. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll talk about that in greater detail. Let's slip into a quick break. On the other side of the break, Sudarshan Sukhani and Shrikant Chauhan will be joining in for some technical trades. Stay tuned.